There is something your doctor has almost certainly never told you. Not because they are hiding it, not because the research does not exist, but because in a standard appointment, squeezed between a blood pressure check and a prescription renewal, there is simply no time to explain how your body actually works at the level where blood sugar problems begin. And that gap, that 12-minute gap between what medicine knows and what you are told, is costing millions of people their health right now in 2025. Here is the part that should stop you cold. The advice most people are following to manage their blood sugar is not wrong exactly. It is just dangerously incomplete. Cut the carbs, watch the sugar, take the medication, and when the medication stops working well enough, add another one. That is the ladder most people climb. And almost nobody tells them there is a door off to the side they never had to climb at all. The fastest way to bring blood sugar down is not about removing food. It is about adding the right ones. Specific foods that do specific mechanical jobs inside your body at the cellular level. Foods that your insulin receptors recognize. Foods that quiet the internal fire that makes those receptors go deaf in the first place. Foods that slow the entire process of sugar entering your bloodstream so your pancreas never has to panic. This is not alternative medicine. This is biochemistry. And once you understand the mechanism, you will never look at your plate the same way again. Before anything else, here is what almost no standard appointment ever gets to. High blood sugar almost never starts with sugar. It starts with insulin. Insulin is the hormone your pancreas releases every time glucose enters your blood. Think of it as the key that unlocks your cells so that glucose can move out of the bloodstream and into the cell where it gets burned as fuel. That is the system working perfectly. But when that system has been under stress for years, something critical shifts. Your cells stop responding to the key. The insulin arrives, it knocks on the receptor, and the cell door stays shut. That is insulin resistance. And it is the engine driving the blood sugar crisis that affects well over 400 million people worldwide right now. Your pancreas does not know the door is jammed. It just knows the glucose is not clearing. So it pumps out more insulin, and more, and more. For a while, the sheer volume of insulin forces enough glucose through to keep your numbers in a manageable range. But eventually, the pancreas starts to strain under that demand. The cells become even more resistant to the flood, and your blood sugar climbs no matter what you eat. That is the moment most people get the diagnosis, and that is the moment the prescription pad comes out. The medication pushes more insulin into a system already overwhelmed by insulin. It works, for a time, but it does not fix the underlying resistance, and so the dose climbs, or a second drug gets added, or eventually, insulin injections enter the picture. The system as it currently operates has no financial incentive to hand you the information you are about to receive. Managing a chronic condition is a revenue model. Reversing it is not. That is not malice. That is just economics. But it does mean the most powerful tools available to you, the ones sitting in a grocery store aisle that cost less than a single prescription copay, rarely get explained with the depth they deserve. Every food in this list does one of three things. It physically slows glucose from entering your bloodstream. It extinguishes the chronic, low-grade inflammation that is keeping your cells deaf to insulin. Or it directly reactivates the insulin receptor so your own body can do the job it was built to do. You do not need to overhaul everything overnight. The approach that works is adding these foods strategically and stacking them over time until your biology shifts underneath you. Let me walk you through each one. The first is fenugreek seeds. Small, amber, hard, and almost universally overlooked. You can find them in the spice aisle of most grocery stores for under $3, and most people walk right past them. That is a mistake that costs more than $3. Inside fenugreek is a soluble fiber called galactomannan. The moment that fiber hits the water in your stomach, it swells into a thick gel. That gel wraps around the carbohydrates moving through your digestive tract and physically slows how fast they empty from your stomach into your small intestine. Slower emptying means glucose enters your blood as a trickle instead of a wave. No wave means no massive insulin spike. No spike means your pancreas is not in emergency mode after every meal. Beyond the fiber, fenugreek contains a specific amino acid called 4-hydroxyisoleucine that has been shown to directly stimulate insulin secretion from the pancreas while simultaneously improving glucose uptake in muscle cells. The combination of slowing the sugar coming in while helping the body use it more efficiently is rare in a single food. Take 1 teaspoon of whole seeds soaked overnight in a glass of water. Drink the water and eat the seeds in the morning before breakfast. If the bitterness is too much, grind them fine and stir half a teaspoon into yogurt or eggs. Start with a small amount. This fiber is potent and your digestive system needs a few days to adjust to it. The second food is cinnamon, and the specific type is the entire point. The cinnamon sitting in most kitchen cabinets right now is cassia cinnamon. It contains a compound called coumarin that accumulates in the liver with daily use and can cause damage over time. The one that matters for blood sugar is Ceylon cinnamon, sometimes called true cinnamon, which contains negligible coumarin and is safe for consistent daily use. What makes it work is a family of polyphenol compounds that behave with striking similarity to insulin at the receptor level. They help the insulin receptor bind glucose more effectively, and they slow gastric emptying the same way fenugreek does. Research published through the USDA Human Nutrition Program demonstrated that less than half a teaspoon per day produced a measurable reduction in fasting glucose in adults with type 2 diabetes. This is a compound in your spice rack that is doing something a pharmaceutical company would charge you $40 a month for. A quarter to half a teaspoon of Ceylon cinnamon stirred into coffee, oatmeal, or a morning smoothie is the target. The key is pairing it with a carbohydrate meal so that the receptor gripping effect is active exactly when you need it. Third is broccoli sprouts, and this distinction is critical enough to repeat twice. Not mature broccoli, the 3-day-old sprouts. If you swap one for the other because they sound equivalent, you lose the majority of the benefit. Broccoli sprouts contain a compound called sulforaphane in concentrations that are between 50 and 100 times higher than fully grown broccoli. And sulforaphane does something that none of the other foods in this list accomplish quite as directly. It reaches the liver and suppresses the enzyme pathway that drives overnight glucose production. Your liver synthesizes glucose while you sleep through a process called gluconeogenesis. In a healthy metabolic state, this process is tightly regulated. In insulin resistance, the brake fails and your liver produces far more glucose overnight than you need, which is exactly why so many people wake up to a fasting number that is higher than their bedtime reading, despite not eating a single thing for 8 hours. A clinical study published in the journal Science Translational Medicine demonstrated that concentrated sulforaphane brought down fasting blood sugar in type 2 diabetic patients, with the most dramatic results in those whose numbers were the most difficult to control. Grow them in a jar on your counter for pennies, or find them in the produce section. A quarter cup on a salad or sandwich most days is sufficient. Do not apply high heat. Eat them raw or barely warmed, because the active compound degrades quickly above moderate temperatures. The fourth food is avocado, and the fear most people carry about it is the exact reason it keeps not being on their plate. The fear is calories and fat. The reality is that the fat inside an avocado, monounsaturated fat, is one of the most insulin-friendly substances you can add to a meal. It does not spike glucose. It does not trigger an insulin response of its own. What it does is slow the entire digestive process of the meal it accompanies. When you add half an avocado to a plate that contains rice or bread or any starch, you are not removing the carbohydrate. You are putting a biological brake on how quickly that carbohydrate converts to blood glucose. The spike becomes a gentle rise. The rise becomes a manageable plateau. Over weeks and months of consistent use, monounsaturated fat has been shown in multiple controlled trials to improve insulin sensitivity at the cellular level, meaning the receptor becomes more responsive over time. Half an avocado per day is the practical target. Add it to eggs in the morning, slice it over a grain bowl at lunch, or mash it onto whole grain toast. Anywhere a starch is present, an avocado reduces its impact. Fifth is chia seeds. If you have ever watched chia seeds sitting in water for 10 minutes, you have already seen the mechanism. They absorb liquid and form a thick, viscous gel. That exact process happens in your stomach. The gel they form wraps around the carbohydrates in your meal and holds them there, releasing glucose slowly over a longer window instead of all at once. The spike disappears. In its place is a gradual rise that your insulin system can manage without strain. Chia is also one of the most concentrated plant sources of alpha-linolenic acid, the plant form of omega-3 fat, which contributes to reducing the chronic inflammation that underlies insulin resistance. 1 to 2 tablespoons per day is the dose. Stir them into yogurt, drop them in water with lemon, and let them gel for 10 minutes before drinking, or blend them into a smoothie. They are flavorless, they require no preparation, and the effect on post-meal glucose is measurable even in the first week. The sixth food moves into different territory entirely. Fatty fish. Specifically, wild salmon, mackerel, sardines, and herring do not work by slowing glucose absorption. They work on the root cause of why your cells stopped listening to insulin in the first place: chronic, low-grade inflammation. Insulin resistance is not simply a mechanical problem with a receptor. It is an inflammatory condition. When the body is in a state of persistent inflammation, inflammatory cytokines physically block the insulin signaling pathway at the cell surface. The receptor is there, the insulin arrives, but the inflammatory interference prevents the signal from completing. EPA and DHA, the two long-chain omega-3 fatty acids found in concentrated amounts in these fish, are among the most potent natural anti-inflammatory compounds identified in nutritional science. They suppress the inflammatory signals, they improve the composition of the cell membrane itself, and they restore the receptor's ability to respond to insulin. 2 servings per week, roughly palm-sized, is the minimum that produces clinical benefit. Baked, grilled, or canned, because canned mackerel and sardines are among the most cost-effective sources of EPA and DHA available anywhere. Seventh is walnuts. Among all nuts, this one earns specific attention for 2 reasons that compound each other. First, walnuts contain polyunsaturated fat and plant-based omega-3 that improve endothelial function, the health of the thin cellular lining inside your blood vessels. High blood sugar begins damaging that lining very early in the disease process, long before most people notice symptoms. Second, the combination of fat, fiber, and protein in walnuts produces a measurable blunting effect on post-meal glucose, and research has shown that regular walnut consumption reduces fasting insulin levels, which is the marker that tells you how hard your pancreas is working just to hold baseline. A quarter cup of raw or dry roasted walnuts used as a snack replacement, substituted directly for crackers, cookies, or chips, converts what would have been a glucose spike into a metabolic non-event. The 8th food is whole eggs, yolk fully included. For decades, the nutritional messaging around eggs was shaped by cholesterol concerns that subsequent research has largely not supported. And in the meantime, millions of people traded eggs for breakfast cereals that devastated their blood sugar in ways an egg never would. A whole egg contains virtually 0 carbohydrate. Its protein and fat composition means that by itself, it barely registers on a glucose meter. But the mechanism that makes eggs genuinely powerful for blood sugar management is what researchers call the second meal effect. When your day begins with protein and fat instead of refined carbohydrate, your blood sugar baseline is set lower for the entire morning. You walk into lunch with calmer numbers, and the spike from that meal is smaller than it would have been if you had started with toast or cereal. The protein satiety effect also eliminates the mid-morning hunger that pushes most people toward processed snacks. 2 to 3 whole eggs in the morning, combined with the avocado covered earlier, forms the most effective blood sugar breakfast combination on this list. Ninth is apple cider vinegar, and this one is unique for a specific reason. It is the only item on this list where the effect is fast enough to observe on a home glucose meter within a single meal. The active compound is acetic acid. It works through 2 simultaneous mechanisms. It delays gastric emptying, slowing the absorption of carbohydrates from the meal that follows. And it activates a pathway in muscle cells that increases glucose uptake, pulling sugar out of the blood and into muscle tissue where it gets used as energy. Research led by scientists at Arizona State University documented a reduction in post-meal blood glucose spikes of approximately 20% when 1 tablespoon of vinegar was consumed before a carbohydrate meal in subjects with insulin resistance. A 20% reduction in the spike, from 1 tablespoon of something that costs a few dollars. 1 tablespoon diluted into a full glass of water, consumed 10 to 15 minutes before a meal containing carbohydrates. Never drink it undiluted because the acid concentration is high enough to damage tooth enamel and the esophageal lining. If you are currently on a blood sugar medication, speak with your doctor before starting because the combination can lower glucose faster than your current dose anticipates. The 10th food is lentils, and this is the one that makes the entire argument of this list concrete. Lentils are a carbohydrate, and lentils will lower your blood sugar. Hold both of those facts at once because they dismantle the most damaging oversimplification in blood sugar management, which is that carbohydrates are the enemy. Lentils are built from resistant starch, a form of carbohydrate that bypasses normal digestion in the small intestine and moves to the large intestine where gut bacteria ferment it rather than convert it to glucose. They are wrapped in soluble fiber that slows whatever glucose does get released, and they carry significant plant protein that further blunts any glycemic response. The result is a carbohydrate food that produces one of the lowest glycemic responses of any staple in the human diet. They also carry the second meal effect. A bowl of lentil soup at lunch produces measurably lower blood sugar after dinner. Replacing white rice or white potato with half a cup to 1 cup of cooked lentils several times a week is one of the most reliable dietary changes for reducing A1C, the 3-month blood sugar average that your doctor checks at your annual visit. Here is where the whole picture comes together. A patient, a woman in her early 60s, recently retired, came in with a fasting glucose reading hovering around 180 and a recommendation from her physician to add a second blood sugar medication. She was frightened. Her mother had walked this same path and lost her peripheral sensation, then her toes, then the vision in one eye. She did not want the medication ladder. She wanted to understand what was actually happening inside her body. The changes made were not dramatic eliminations. No foods were forbidden. What changed was what got added. Eggs and avocado replaced cereal at breakfast. A tablespoon of diluted apple cider vinegar went in before her larger meals. Lentils substituted for white rice several times per week. A small handful of walnuts replaced the afternoon cookie. Fatty fish appeared on the menu twice a week. Ceylon cinnamon went into her morning coffee. Broccoli sprouts landed on her lunch sandwich. Within the first week, her fasting numbers began falling. Within 3 months, coordinated with her physician who was monitoring the numbers throughout, she reduced off the second medication entirely. Her A1C moved from the diabetic range back toward the normal threshold. And the most significant part is not the 3-month result. It is that the result held, sustained, because the underlying insulin resistance had started to reverse, not just been chemically suppressed. That is the difference between managing a number and repairing the system producing it. Now here is one boundary that cannot be skipped. If you are currently taking insulin by injection or a sulfonylurea class medication, meaning one of the older oral drugs that directly stimulates insulin secretion, these foods will lower your blood sugar meaningfully and potentially faster than your current medication dose accounts for. That creates a real risk of hypoglycemia, blood sugar dropping too low, which carries its own serious dangers. Do not stop any prescription independently. Instead, bring this information to your next appointment. Bring the specific foods, the mechanisms, and ask your physician to monitor your numbers more frequently as you add them. The goal is to let your improving biology drive the medication dose down under medical supervision, not to create a gap between what your body needs and what the medication is delivering. The practical starting point is simpler than it sounds. Tonight, soak a teaspoon of fenugreek seeds in a glass of water. Tomorrow morning, drink that water and eat those seeds before anything else. Then follow it with 2 or 3 whole eggs and half an avocado instead of whatever you would normally have for breakfast. That single morning change will alter your blood sugar curve for the entire day in a way you can measure. Find Ceylon cinnamon, not the standard grocery store variety, and start a 1/4 teaspoon in your morning coffee. Before your largest carbohydrate meal of the day, take that tablespoon of apple cider vinegar in a full glass of water 15 minutes ahead. This week, replace white rice or white potato with lentils at least twice, and plan 2 meals around fatty fish. Add chia seeds to your yogurt. Pick up broccoli sprouts at the produce section. Put walnuts where the afternoon snack used to be. Stack these changes over 2 weeks. Not all at once, because your digestive system, particularly as you increase fiber intake, needs time to adjust. But steady addition, food by food, meal by meal, and the biology underneath begins to shift in a direction medications alone cannot produce. Because medications manage the number while the system keeps deteriorating. But food, repaired at the cellular level, changes what the system is capable of on its own. The cells that stopped answering the door start opening it again. The pancreas stops straining. The liver stops overproducing glucose through the night. The inflammation that was jamming every signal begins to quiet. And the number on your meter in the morning starts reflecting a body that is healing, not just being chemically held in place. There is one more piece to this that most people never get explained to them. Even with every one of these foods working correctly throughout the day, a significant number of people still wake up to their highest glucose reading of the entire day, first thing in the morning, before eating a single bite after 8 hours of fasting. The number should logically be lower after a full night without food. Instead, it is higher. There is a precise biological mechanism driving that. It happens in your liver while you sleep, and there is a targeted way to address it. That mechanism, and exactly how to shut it down before it produces your worst reading of the day, is the subject of the next discussion. It connects directly to everything covered here, and for many people, it is the missing piece that makes the morning number finally move in the right direction.